Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're going to cover You Can't Fix Stupid, but it is on sale everywhere. This is an important one. Lots of great experience to share with you here, and some food for thought. So without further ado, here we go. All right, before we get started, I want to say a quick thank you to a couple of our sponsors. MDT, proud maker of fine rifle chassis, to our great friends of the North in Canada. They make everything from the ACC Elite, the MDT ACC, the HNT 26. The list goes on and on. So if you want to upgrade your rifle, a great way to do it is to put a stock on your rifle that is adjustable and fits you properly. And a great place to see a lot of the great options out there is to stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com today. We'd also like to thank TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. They're made in Canada. I think there's a theme going on here. And they make a lot of great triggers for a lot of different makes and models of rifles. 2-stage, single-stage, different shoes designs. You can get a curved shoe, straight shoe. And for us here, they are one of the safest triggers on the market. Easy to install, one screw to adjust. Really, as far as I'm concerned, probably one of the safest triggers on the market. That's why we put them in all of our rifles here. So if you want to upgrade your rifle, besides the stock, a great place to do it is put a good quality trigger in it. If you're going to do that, use the best, and that's TriggerTech. You can stop over and see more at triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. All right, as you can tell, I'm suffering still from a little bit of a cold, but I think this is such a good podcast that we're just going to go through it and do it anyway. So I hope you all can understand me well and hear me okay. But as the title goes, you can't fix stupid, but it's on sale everywhere. And I just want to share with you my food for thought, because I get asked this question all the time and I'm in the right mood to answer it. So we're going to answer it straight in this podcast in the most direct way possible. So we just finished up a range day, and where we had clients come in, alumni from our long-range shooting school, some of the guys that have our custom rifles, bring them in, and basically it's an advanced ballistics class. We get to help them dope out their rifle. We get to help them sort out some of the problems of trying to get real good working dope, zeros, chronograph speeds, tools that they might not have. Plus we get to challenge them with a lot of different shooting that they might encounter on a hunting trip or in a match scenario. So it's really just a fun day at the range to go over, teach a little bit, polish up, get the rifles running. Not uncommon for people to bring their own rifles, and I usually don't have a problem with that. But that said, though, this problem is getting worse and worse, and it's getting worse all the time. So people ask me this: when do you go custom, or should I do a prefit? Should I upgrade my rifle? Should I build my own? This is a common question, right? This is my straight answer. Stay factory until you can buy a real custom rifle. I say this with all the kindness in my heart to say that, like a gentleman that we just had here, right? Bad things happen through inexperience. The bad things happen through sales and sales techniques and marketing, where they say that, hey, this is drop fit, put this together, fits fine, put all your stuff on it, you're fine. And I am telling you, it is not true at all. Even on your middle-priced custom rifles, we have almost 2 decades of training, of having hundreds of people come in every year to learn and study and spend time with us at the range, whether it's, at the long range shooting school, advanced classes, ballistic classes, King of the Mountain, movers, you name it. We're on the line with a lot of rifles all the time. And it just seems like it's getting worse in the fact that they sort of con people to do small upgrades or to take the next step, right? And going from factory to, well, here, just do this and you can build one that's almost as good, medium priced custom rifle that's, maybe a step up from factory. And they look custom. Of course, they have a quote unquote custom receiver. They have a barrel that's been machined by a quote unquote loosely gunsmith who is banging out barrels in a production line as fast as he can because he's selling them as cheap as he can. and he's using any barrel that he can find to do it. And it happens just like this. Last year, we had 4 smart gentlemen come in from the great state of Texas, purchased branded rifles. Now, mind you, I don't want to say any names, but not Joe Blow down the corner, but not a factory gun and not a high-end custom rifle or custom rifle manufacturer, per se, but sub-marketed through, let's just say, connections to some type of competitions, right? And they bought 4 of them, paid huge money for them. They also bought the recommended suppressors through this same sort of team of people who were in this type of shooting. And of course, they have their buddies that they bring in, and they get a kickback from selling that product. And in this case was a suppressor. It was quote unquote authorized or sponsored, or they're part of their quote unquote team, or however you want to call it, right? It's marketing. And it's people sticking money in their pockets, which, don't get me wrong, The Good Prophet is a good book, and everybody has to make a living. They have to provide a service for that living. However, though, what happens is like a customer that just came through, they're vulnerable to the hype and the technique, and they wind up with a less than perfect rifle that is dangerous. We have, and I can't tell you how many times I've had instructors here trying to fix people's rifles that were either done on the cheap or marketed as such that they're a step up and made quickly, easily, inefficiently, efficiently, however you want to say it. But in the end, it's junk, right? And in the end, it puts customers at grave risk. So here's the deal, right? We had 4 guys come up from Texas, do a private shooting school with us. They brought their own rifles. These guys had money. There was no, they were in the oil and gas industry. They worked for it, but obviously, they weren't fretting over $20, right? But they got suckered into spending massive money on a quote-unquote authorized participants of whatever type of competition. And these are their authorized rifles, and these are the suppressors that they recommend that are part of the whatever. And I said to them when they showed up, and I don't mean any disrespect or hard, or I have no axe to grind here, other than it's customers. It's people. There are people shooting these things. We have children shooting these things, right? When they brought the rifles, I asked them, I'm like, did you guys shoot these yet? And they're like, oh, no. And I'm like, and then they started breaking out these suppressors with muzzle brakes, which, again, on bolt action rifles, no good. With the exception of maybe Dead Air, who will put a direct thread in it. If you're shooting a bolt action rifle, do not put a muzzle brake adapter on your rifle and then put your suppressor on it. I asked them, I'm like, have these suppressors been on these guns? And they're like, no, they're all brand new, but trust me, these are top of the line. Okay. Would you like me to run a ground rod in the muzzle to see if they're indexed properly and you're not going to shoot them off the end of your gun? Sure. 3 of the 4 would have had baffle strikes in the first shot. 3 of the 4. How would you like your 12-year-old pulling the trigger on a suppressor that explodes off the end of the gun or has a baffle strike? In this case, I ask them, because we're getting ready to shoot the guns, I'm like, look, I have other suppressors here that are direct thread, because we can tell. We can stick the ground rod in. The ground rod will stick out the very face of the suppressor, and we can see the clearance around the rod as to whether or not the bullet's going to travel straight through the suppressor. So we can tell if it's been threaded properly, the rifle, or if there's something wrong with the suppressor, or if there's something wrong with the attachment from the brake to the suppressor. That said, we took those suppressors off and the muzzle brakes, and we put our direct threads on. They were way better. So they would have shot. I mean, they still weren't straight. They weren't as straight as what I'd like them to be. But okay, we'll let them pass. But they were sold that you don't need to test anything. No, these are the suppressors we recommend. They are part of our quote unquote shooting clique or whatever you want to call it, because it's all marketing and advertising, right? And so whenever people launch something that's becoming popular, of course, everybody wants to know what they recommend, and those people are profiting off of it, right? That was 3 of the 4 that if we would have taken them to the range to zero their new guns, they would have blasted 3 suppressors off the end of your guns. And what do you think happens sometimes when you do these baffle strikes? Sometimes just shoots the suppressor off the end of the gun, but other times you can get them to come apart. I have seen welds fail on suppressors, right? Now let's go back to a gentleman that came through with his home-built rifle, right? He did everything right. I'm not faulting him for anything that he did. But rather than having a professional build his rifle, he fell victim to, well, I'll just buy the parts and pieces, scrounging the internet for pre-fit barrels. In this case, it was a Savage nut system, which you all know I'm not a big fan of, especially for custom. I mean, it works great for Savage, but I would never put one on a custom rifle. I don't care what anybody says. You're stretching and holding that with tensile strength between the two threads pulling against each other. It moves. They have issues. At that level, it should not be done that way. Why do they do it that way? Why does Savage have a barrel nut system? Because it's cheap. Because it's easy for them to headspace. They can simply thread the outside of the barrel. There's no shoulder to index, time, set, space, anything. Then as long as they got the chamber close, they can screw it in and out to set the headspace and lock the nut and they're good to go. It's a manufacturing technique to be cheap, right? It doesn't belong on a custom rifle. And so this guy fell victim to this. So, I remember one time years ago, I don't really chime in much on the internet and forums and stuff. I sort of mind my own business. I'm the type of guy that says, I love that one line that says, mind your own biscuits and life will be gravy, right? I'm not one for throwing stones. But when it comes time to hurting people or really putting people at risk of damaging things that they paid for, things that they worked hard, the money that they spend, be it $20 or $2,000, if it damages the product or shoots the suppressor off the end of the gun or somebody gets hurt, right? You didn't just damage a product, you stole from them, right? You stole the time and effort it took for them to find the product. You stole the money that they had to work. You stole the time that it took for them to make that money, right? And when you take money for a product, you have to deliver. You have to give them what you're, and you have to think about the customer, right? So the gentleman brought this suppressor to our class, and needless to say, it was a 30 cal suppressor on a 6.5 barrel. He probably had 20 thousandths at best one clearance on one side. Had it been any closer, I would have DQ'd him. I mean, it was so close to touching and getting a baffle strike. This is the closest I've ever seen, and be like, dude, if this thing shifts, there's a chance you're going to start getting rubbed bullets, and you're going to get flyers. You're going to get, wasn't right? So he also had a barrel tuner stuck on it. He had all this weight on the end of the rifle, as well as it was a barrel nut system on a remage system. And the person who did the threading, of course, and did the chambering and all the other things, these guys are pounding this out. This is a commodity-based industry. It's not custom. This is a product that they're trying to produce as fast and as cheap as possible because that's how they're selling it. They want it to be a very inexpensive alternative to a custom rifle. But in the end, I honestly believe you don't get anything better than if you just went out and bought a factory Tikka, or you went out and bought a really heavy barreled whatever brand. I would say you're still in the same boat, but you saved half the money, right? So why am I so bent on this a little bit? Well, because halfway through, after everything was put together, the suppressor causing issues. I know he had a couple shots where there was just no calls. I don't know where, the rifle was just not performing. However, though, when he stuck his muzzle brake on and suppressor combination, what he didn't realize is the locking mechanism, because he afterwards he was saying, it always gets carboned up. You can't get it on and off right. It's always sticking in there. And this is the problem with muzzle braked. It works great for AR-15s, putting them over flash hiders. But in bolt guns, it causes lots of issues, including it actually moving around on the brake. But he got a bunch of carbon to come flying out the side where the locking mechanism was, because it wasn't locked down properly and it wasn't timed properly. Well, guess who got hit in the face with that? Yeah, yours truly. Now, I didn't get hurt. It wasn't bad enough to do anything other than sting a little bit, right? It didn't break any skin. It wasn't the suppressor came apart. But this is the problem when you start messing around with this stuff, buying these products that really aren't based well enough to help you put it together, selling you all the wrong products, and then letting you put it together wrong and putting yourself and everybody else at risk. At the shooting school here, we have had so many issues with this that, I just can't even begin to tell you. I've had instructors spend a half a day on people's rifles trying to figure out what the heck is wrong with them. I have had customers bring in rifles where the case heads were separating. They were cracking. Shoulders on the cases were splitting. I've had, customers bring their brand new custom rifles, not mine, and shoot the suppressor right off the end of your gun. Hence why we have all the ground rods here, So we waste 45 minutes of a class going down range looking for a customer suppressor that he just shot off his gun. And I just ask him, I'm like, hey, this is years ago. Is that a direct threat or is that, no, it's break. It should be fine. Gunsmith said it's fine. You sure? Did you check it? And he's like, well, no. I'm like, look, I have a shop 15 minutes from here. We're going to be talking for another half an hour. Why don't I send one of the guys out to get a set of ground rods and bring them back, and we'll check your suppressor before you put it on there and shoot it. No, the gunsmith said it'll be fine. Yeah. Half an hour later, we've got all these grown men walking around in front of the firing line trying to find the suppressor that he shot off the end of his gun. There are too many times in life that people, and in our market, there became such a big push, like machining and everything else. Don't get me wrong. I am big for everybody and anybody learning how to machine and master the art of building custom rifles. I love it. It's in my blood, right? But it became such a thing that in every corner of every town, anybody that can get their hands on a lathe now wants to build custom rifles. And that's okay. Then some of them get into the fact where I can do it faster and cheaper. And, I'll try to meet that medium market between the custom rifles and the factory rifles. And that's okay. I mean, honestly. But you have to take the time if you're going to do that stuff to make sure that A, you know what you're doing, B, you're doing it right, C, you're not putting the customer at risk or people around them. And so, however this rifle was built, I know he did a lot of the assembly himself, but he did buy and follow the instructions by a name brand, quote-unquote gunsmith, someone who's been around for a while. I'm not going to mention any names, but if you're buying pre-fit barrels, there are guys that do a lot of pre-fits with the Savage nut system. It's not because it's better. It's easier. It's easier for them. It's easier for them to sell to you, and then they pass it off on you to headspace it properly, right? You need to ask yourself, if you're into this type of hunting and shooting, what are you looking to do? If you are getting into this and trying to learn and master the art of long-range shooting or setting up a rifle to go out and do hunting, sometimes, I'm going to be honest with you, it is better off to stay with a factory rifle. At least it's built to a standard, it's built correctly, and it's probably passed several safety checks before it got to you. And yes, it doesn't have the custom quote-unquote feel to it. You could upgrade the stock if you wanted to, right? You could upgrade the trigger if you wanted to, but leave the core of the rifle alone. When you start upgrading the other parts, though, it is really a crapshoot of whether or not it's going to be better. I find a lot of times they're actually no better. Like, I can list I've been around a while, and I don't like to bash people in our industry, but there are a lot of medium grade and medium priced rifles that we just know won't shoot consistently well, right? That we have tons of customers that have sent 1, 2, and 3 back that we have grown to know over the years that they bought this marketed bigger custom rifle builder, branded custom rifle. They get it, won't shoot. They send it back, get the next one, won't shoot. Send it back, the third one finally shoots. They have a friend that buys one. First one comes, won't shoot. Second one. How much is your time worth? If they would have probably had better luck if they went out and bought a Tikka, bought a Seiko, a Ruger, even a Savage, right? I don't think you're going to find a quote-unquote bad gun. You might not find one that shoots to the level that you think you want it to be at, but I'll be honest with you. You hand me a rifle that's capable of minute of angle shooting, and I'll hand it to a dozen people that can shoot and ring steel at 1,000 yards all day with it. Now, are they going to hit the center all the time? Maybe not. But most shooters aren't there yet anyway. They go out and enjoy the time. So I bring this up for several different reasons. First of all, when you're out with groups of people, safety glasses, be mindful of who's shooting around you, what they're shooting. I mean, I'm very cautious, like even watching people working bolts. I start to see stiff bolt lifts. I start to see, people, jamming the magazine closed. Like, for example, with this week alone, I know somebody that went out with somebody else that was building AR-15s, dropped the bolt, the gun fired. How about that? There we go, custom AR builder. Is that not insanely unsafe, right? That's not a factory LWRC. That's not a factory, whatever AR-15 you want to talk about. This is what you're getting into when you start to get into the medium grade rifles, especially when you get into either the mass production, because the only reason they're a little more expensive than factory is they haven't figured out how to make them cheap enough to sell at factory prices. So they're a little bit higher, but they're of no better quality, right? I'm telling you this as a guy that 19 years old. Dude, I slept in a 19-foot RV, practically homeless, right? I drove a $600 car and I worked 3 jobs, right? And I was in the guard. So I'm not standing here grandstanding saying you have to go out and buy the most expensive thing. I know the value of a dollar bill, right? We all do. We've all grown up and paid the school of hard knocks and the stupidity tax. And, so when I'm sitting here telling you this, I'm telling you this from a guy that says, look, a dollar is a dollar. It's worth every penny of it. And be careful when people are fishing this out of your pocket and what they're trying to sell you, because not only A, can you not get what you paid for, but B, you can get yourself in a bad way. So this week alone, I mean, the AR-15, I know somebody went out with another person, not with us, and they dropped a slide. Bang, the gun went off. That's a guy that's selling custom AR-15s. One of the most dangerous situations I've seen personally is a guy got one to fire out a battery, custom AR-15. He built and modified some parts on it. I don't know what the whole story is, other than the only thing that saved him from getting hit in the head with the slide is the fact that it kicked sideways in the receiver. Yeah. I have had to ask people to stop shooting because their barrels were unspinning from their quote-unquote custom rifle while they were shooting it. Yeah. So, am I passionate about this? You're damn skippy I am, because when you start putting people at risk, like I went back and I'm just stunned. Like years ago, I had to ban all rifles from our shooting school with the exception of school rifles, because we just had so many problems like this of home built or built wrong, built cheaply. The customer doesn't know any better, and he puts it together thinking he's upgrading something and he's got himself in a bad situation and he puts other people at risk doing it. And so, yeah, when I get hit in the face with something, I wasn't real happy. So, yeah, I pulled the gun. I looked at it. I'm like, nothing's indexed properly here. And you've got gases leaking out around this locking mechanism. And all the carbon, when you shot, just blew right through there and come back and hit me, right? I get exposed to this stuff more often than what most people think. And I am very cautious. I have a lot of life left to live. I don't want to end up cashing my chips in early. But when I see this on a regular basis, I know there's got to be customers out here getting exposed to this that just don't know any better. You put your kid behind that gun, or worse yet, like I was 6 feet behind the shooter and shooting prone. Imagine if you were sitting at a bench and your 12-year-old's like literally standing right beside you looking down range without safety glasses on. I've seen suppressors come apart where welds have failed because of an inexperienced welder that was hired and didn't know any better, right? How about that? So I actually got hit in the face with parts of it because the suppressor failed. Now, I had glasses on. I didn't get hurt. The scope took a little bit of the brunt of the beating because the weld failed on the shank that threaded on the gun. The gun was fine. The threads were fine on the gun. The weld failed. And it opened the can up backwards, almost like think of a megaphone facing rearward, and it redirected the blast, like the parts and pieces coming back, the weld. So the reason I'm sharing this with you, and the reason I'm telling you that you can't fix stupidity, but it is for sale everywhere, that's because it's for sale everywhere, right? Do yourself a favor. Do your research. Make sure you're buying quality. Piss on these guys that are out there banging this stuff out for next to nothing, bragging about why chamber 3,000 barrels a year. Well, good for you. Good for you. What about the one that just went out there and blew the suppressor off the guy's rifle? Who are you going to blame it on? You're going to blame it on the suppressor manufacturer? Or that, you're going to use that get out of jail free card that, well, you must not have locked it up properly? We see this all the time. 3 out of 4 in a group from Texas. This last class barely passed. I mean, he was so close, it was ridiculous. We've had barrels unscrewing because they didn't tighten it down the whole way because you wouldn't have got the go and no-go the clear. So the guy just tightened the barrel down mildly rather than the whole way. And it was literally unscrewing from the gun while the guy was shooting it at the school here. It was a 300 Win Mag. Imagine if that would have turned a half a turn, that case would have separated, right? Happens. I've built a lot of rifles over the years, but I've actually had a lot of customers bring us other builds that they had trouble with. And we stopped taking them because the customers would use us to tell the gunsmith what we found and, just sort of throwing us under the bus. So we don't do that anymore, just simply because it's a small community. But I literally had a guy bring in a custom built, higher end gunsmith here from Pennsylvania, a rifle that looked like the chamber had been set forward, but not set forward the whole way. It was missing like half the throat. It was a train wreck, and he would get one shot. He couldn't get the bolt open, couldn't get the next rounds to feed. Literally half the chambering, like from the set forward, you could see where it was sat forward, but then not sat forward far enough to redo everything in front of where the new chamber reamer was being pushed in. And it had actually looked like it was potentially a different caliber at one time, whether in the same caliber family, but different case cartridge. So what I'm telling you here, and as a friend, you can take it for good, bad, ugly. I can't help this part, right? This is me coming out because I've had a daughter shooting her whole life growing up with me. I have friends that take their kids out all the time. I have kids at the shooting school here all the time. The last thing I want is any of them to ever get hurt, right? And to ruin for themselves and their family and their dad. I mean, imagine if you're a dad taking your daughter out and your daughter gets hurt while you're shooting. Imagine how it's going to make you feel, right? And so I see this stuff all the time, and I'm just absolutely sick of it that there are a lot of people producing a lot of stuff out there that put people in harm's way. I mean, this is just this week alone. Like, someone was exposed to a slam fire. First round, dropped the carrier, and the gun went off. Bang, right? Imagine if the slide would have caught the next round and closed on it. Bang again. Bang again. Bang, bang. You see where this goes, right? So do yourself a favor. Don't think that when you're upgrading to buying unproven, like running around buying all these parts from people that are just manufacturing stuff for retail. They're just producing a commodity. They're not producing something unique. They're not producing something at a higher end. They are just that guy banging out, doing the same thing everybody else is doing, but trying to do it cheaper. And in the end, you can wind up getting what you paid for. I think as a shooter, you are always better off to stay with a factory gun until you're ready to upgrade and then do your homework. Make sure you're buying and let a professional build it that knows what they're looking at when they're putting it together. Even if you bought all the parts, right? It would have saved this guy from an embarrassment. It would have saved another guy this week from dropping an AR slide and a gun firing, right? But I can tell you that over the years, we have actually banned people from bringing their own rifles just because this happens all the time. People don't brag about this when they go to the range and have huge problems. A lot of times it's embarrassing if they have a gun come apart, whatever. But when you're in the industry and you go to the range constantly with a million makes and models, you get to see over time that this happens way more than you think. And it happens to the guy that's really trying to upgrade his game, and he's trying to, do baby steps in upgrading his equipment because that's what he can afford. And I don't blame him for that at all. But I do blame the people that are selling him the snake oil upgrade and really not giving him anything in return for the money. And a lot of times they're not qualified for what they're doing and they're giving him an unsafe product. And in which case that I start to get a little bit bent about. And we see it here all the time. So at the end of this year, so if you'll notice on our website, we have our online long-range shooting school, of course, and then we have our long-range shooting school. But effectively, immediately, those that have signed up with their personal rifles are still going to be able to come through this year. But anyone who signed up from yesterday forward, you're using a school rifle through the shooting school. And the reason being is we cannot have this on our firing line. And it's just, as much as I'd like to think that we can check for it, like we check this guy's suppressor and try to look everything over the best we can, we didn't build the rifle. And now you've got too many people home building their rifles or putting them together from parts and pieces gathered up from all over the place, and they just have problems. And the last place that we need it here is at a shooting school where I might have a 15-year-old kid on the line next to you and your gun comes apart. So it's sad to say that, we end up having to say, look, in the interest of everybody coming to the shooting school, we're going to use our rifles. It's going to be all inclusive. We're going to supply everything. We're going to teach you the art, and you can go back and set up your rifle when you leave. So when you leave, you know how to set up your dope and how to set up your. It's not rifle specific. You can pick up any rifle and run it, right? We're teaching you the art of what we do and how we set up the click charts and how we make click charts and how we zero rifles. Should be an expert or pretty damn close when you leave in 3 days. We've been doing it for quite a while, but it's going to be all inclusive here forward. And I'm just a little irked that I have to do that. And, you would think that a lot of the stuff that's being marketed and sold is just taken to that next level, giving that customer what he's paid hard-earned money for. But the sad truth of the matter, it isn't. So not to be a negative Nancy in this particular podcast, I do want to tell you that we get asked this all the time. When should I upgrade from a factory rifle? Dude, we have a young lady in our online long-range shooting school that's shooting a Tikka. She's hammering. I mean, she's shooting great. She would have shot circles around a lot of the other rifles that we see coming through. And so I'm going to tell you, until you're really ready to upgrade to just a top of the line, built the way you want it, with just the best premium products and the best people and the best equipment making it, the best equipment in the world making it, not the stuff from a worn out tire shop that came 60 years ago. That's what you're looking to do, right? That's when you make that investment. Like we just had a gentleman that came in and stopped by, and he was talking about he went out on an elk hunt and his rifle got banged around a couple of times. We're finishing him up with 300 Win Mag as we speak. And when he got his chance, his elk, he shot at it twice, 50 yards, couldn't hit it. And went home and he was like 6 feet low and to the right. But when he took it to his home range, he couldn't even hit a piece of cardboard in front of him at 50 yards. I think he ended up harvesting it, but not the way that he wanted to with his rifle, that's for sure. So stay factory or go custom with just the people that you trust that are building on world-class equipment, that know what they're doing, and that are going to build the rifle complete and hand it to you ready to go, no questions asked. There are things things you don't know, and things you don't know. And in this case, that's what happens a lot. I'm sure that these people that have all these problems and building their own rifle or buying the parts and pieces and listening to how everybody's saying do this and do that and the other thing, none of them have bad intentions, but they don't know what they don't know, and they get themselves in harm's way really fast. So my suggestion to anyone who ever asks is this: you're always better off to go with a good factory rifle, and I mean a good factory rifle like Seiko, Tikka. I don't know if I would go with some of the upper end quote-unquote factory rifles. I'm not quite sure that they're up there with what a real custom builder would do, right? But okay, they got some marketing power, branding power, probably about as good as a Seiko or Tikka, as far as shooting wise, but certainly I don't think you're getting everything that you're paying for. So when you're working on this and you're getting after it, here I always say safety first, right? Think about what you're buying, do your research. Don't listen to all the sales pitchy stuff and all the stuff you read, on the top 10 this, the top 10 that, and how easy it is to put it together. Again, this 2 times in 1 week, I can tell you, and this is every week we hear these stories, every year we see them, and it puts you, the end user, at risk, right? And that's what we're trying to say. Look, be careful. We want you to be around shooting and enjoying the sport for a long time to come, especially when we start to get the kids involved and we get younger shooters out there on a firing line. You never want one of them to get hurt. You never want one of them to see something bad happen. This is our job and our responsibility. And so we sort of have to take it seriously. So if you're asking me what I would do right here, right now, if all I could afford was a Tikka or something along that lines, I would run that until its ears fell off and I was ready to build something up to that next level. But above and beyond this middle stuff that you see where everybody's, competing on price and driving the cost down to save every dollar that they can in every way that they can so they can compete on price. And in the end, it's not giving you a better product. When it's a race to the bottom, nobody wins. I always try to stay with that, and we'll leave this podcast at that. So starting from here forward, if you want to take your own rifle to our shooting school, you're going to have to take the online long-range shooting school, which, by the way, we think is world-class. We're putting up new videos every week and have lots of people attending, and we certainly appreciate it. But right here forward, it's just our issued custom rifles here. just simply because we just been exposed to this way too many times over the decades, and it's still here, and it's even getting worse, and we just can't have it. So if you're interested in coming and joining us at our shooting school, we've always said that when we had all issued rifles on the line, they were some of the smoothest running classes that you could possibly ask for. Usually at the end of the day, making us get in 2 more hours of training and still having an hour to spare at the end of the day with all the headaches and stupid stuff we don't have to fix and repair and chase and adjust. And so in the end, it's a win-win for the customer, that's for sure. But starting from here forward, if you would like to attend our shooting school, this is the reason why. It's you, it's your safety, it's us being accountable to make sure that you're not exposed to somebody else bringing something here that's going to put everybody at risk, unbeknownst to everybody. And we have no way to check every single rifle for every single problem that can happen. And God, I can give you a laundry list of stuff that we've seen over the last couple of decades. Before we continue on, I do want to say thank you to our last sponsor of the show. I do want to say thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger makes fine cut rifle barrels out of the great state of Wisconsin. Well, they really are what I consider some of the best in the world. If you would like, they offer a new program called KriegerDirect.com where you can log on and purchase your barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days, which I find to be fascinating. So if you want a barrel and you need it now, you can stop over to KriegerDirect.com, and that's KriegerDirect.com today. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I hope it makes sense, and I hope it comes off with good intentions and a good heart. Really, as you can tell, I'm sort of a little burned out on it, and I've been put in harm's way too many times, and I know many other people have as well. And just got to bring it to the forefront, say this is the conversation that needs to happen. And I think a lot of people getting into our sport need to be aware that this stuff happens often, happens a lot, and you buy it and you put it together. Like I said, you can't fix stupid, but it's on sale everywhere. And unfortunately, for those that don't know any better, they get drawn into it all the time. So please be safe. Do your homework, think about what you're doing, and realize that you're shooting real rifles with real ammunition that have a lot of horsepower behind them, right? So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join the podcast. We really appreciate it. If you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to leave a nice comment down below, we always appreciate that. It means us a lot and helps us a lot in the ratings. If you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to share it, please feel free to share it. That helps us a lot as well. If you enjoy the podcast, you'd like to join us on the Wolf Pack. So we have a new program. You can stop over to Patreon and you can look for Wolf Precision Inc. And for $3 a month, you can support. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us here. We really appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.